So, we're here to talk about Leviathan, your new album. It's gonna be released in a couple of days, and well, it's just to say it's fucking amazing. Actually, it gives everything that it promised because you promised that this is gonna be a hit album, something that the fans been waiting for some years, and you hear the 11 songs, and each of them can be a single. This is quite amazing. So it's a very different change from the previous beloved Antichrist. So what happened exactly? So you decided to do such different album this time?
Well, it felt like I had nothing left I was dreaming about. After beloved Antichrist, I had fulfilled my last big dream, so it felt a bit empty, like, okay, what now? But I spoke to Thomas about it, and we came to the conclusion that there's actually one thing that Therion never did that could be a great challenge. Because all these years, Therion would always do what the band wanted. We didn't care what the record label wanted, and we didn't even care what the fans wanted. We just did whatever we wanted, and as a consequence, the record sales would go up and down, because some records became way more popular than others, and that's something you have to live with. If you want to go your own way, that's how it is. So record sales went like a roller coaster up and down through the Therion career. So the only thing we never did was trying to give the fans what they want. And it sounds so easy, doesn't it? Just take a guitar and write some songs. Yeah, let's do it. But it's not really that easy. So we thought that could actually be a challenge,
Yeah.
Instead of always, putting ourselves on very high horses and saying, look, we're this band, we'll always do what we want. We have integrity. We don't try to, flirt with the fans or give them what you want. Okay, let's not be so pretentious. Let's just see if we actually can do it for a start, And it wasn't so easy in the beginning. In the beginning, it was very slow, like trying to write songs to command. But fortunately, we learned a lot from doing Beloved Antichrist, because then when you write for certain scenes, you have to write in a certain style. So after a while, it really broke loose, and in the end, we had written over 40 songs, over 40 songs, and good songs. I mean, we wrote more than that. We wrote shit songs as well, but over 40 songs that were actually, good songs, and we realized that at least 34 or 35 songs would be album quality. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting on enough material for 3 albums. So we decided to do a trilogy. So Leviathan is actually Leviathan 1, and there will be one album released each year is the plan. So there will be Leviathan 2 and one Leviathan 3. Mm-hmm. And we divided the songs according to style a little bit. So Leviathan 1 is more like a bombastic, epic hit album. Well, Leviathan 2 is more dark and melancholic, but still very hippie, but more dark and melancholic. And Leviathan 3 are the songs that were not fitting into any of the other 2 categories. So it will be a very diverse album. More adventurous songs, some experimental songs, some heavier songs, some more progressive songs, some bit folkish songs. It's a weird blend of everything. So, yeah, it was a pretty unexpected thing.
Yeah, and actually this album, or at least this third part of Leviathan, feels closer to classic metal, classic heavy metal. Of course, you have songs like The Dead on the Side, which you release a video for it, which is more folkish. But the rest of the album, is really close. And Great Marquis of Hell feels like power metal. Actually, it's really cool. But yeah, this part feels closer to simplicity of heavy metal.
Yeah, well, we go up to the 80s heavy metal. That's our music. There was a lot of heavy metal there before too, like God of Kingu. It's a straightforward heavy metal song. The 80s, we had Flesh of the Gods, very 80s.
Yeah.
Therion is very access influenced. There's a lot of 80s heavy metal, but maybe they were more cleverly disguised in the past. Maybe they're a bit more naked in this record. More obvious 80s heavy metal. Yeah, I mean, in the 80s, that's where metal as we know it was created. So, and when you speak about, metal hit songs, that's something of the 80s as well. I mean, there are no bands from 1990 and onwards that managed to create, well, actually with one exception, Judas Priest Painkillers in 91. But apart from that, I don't know one single heavy metal song written from the 90s and onwards that can compare with the hit songs of the 80s. Not even the bands, from the 80s who wrote those hit songs was able to repeat it. And if you see bands that came later, well, Metallica managed to do it, but I don't really know any other bands that managed to make these total evergreens, like a metal song who everybody knows. I would say Number of the Beast, Ace of Spades, Breaking the Law, everybody knows these songs. They can be played on a 7-Eleven. You ask your dad and he will probably know which it is. But if you take it could be like a great song from Nightwish, the platinum selling band, but still not everybody will know it. Or I don't even know which bands are most popular today, Slipknot or whatever, these type of bands, they never managed to create like an evergreen in the same way, like Breaking the Law or Run to the Hills or something like that.
Yeah. So
I think if you want to write metal hit songs and you want to, really get the essence of it, it's really the 80s where you're going to look.
Totally. That's exactly the feeling I got when I listened for the first time the album. I listened to songs like Tuonela, Tuner Light, and I thought, okay, if you play this like 20 years ago in a radio station, a metal radio station, this will be a hit single like, I don't know, Running to Hills or any Judas Priest classic song. It's actually what the fans wanted, that's for sure. Why do you think, because, Therion has done a lot of stuff during your career. You have changed so many times of styles, and as you say, you've done everything you wanted. But anyways, doing a project like Beloved Antichrist, which is 3 hours, and you did everything there, but probably Leviathan will sell more. Why is that? Why fans prefer something like this?
Well, you can't really compare it because Beloved Antichrist CD is not even the main product. That's a soundtrack to a rock music, operatic rock musical, which is a tough sell in itself. But since the rock musical hasn't been staged yet, it's even more tough sell. So, I mean, if you see Beloved Antichrist be performed on stage, it will be completely different for you when you listen to the record later. But because of financial reasons, we had to make the record first. So it's really weird. It's like releasing the soundtrack first and the movie comes later. But there was no other way of doing it financially. And unfortunately, because of this fucking Corona shit, I don't know when it's going to be staged. Because we were about to stage it in Mexico, and then this shit happened, and now everything is postponed until who the fuck knows. So that's really an aching wound in me, because this was my big dream to do it, and then it just got ruined. I don't care if it only happened once. It's okay if it's staged one time on the whole planet, and we can record it and release it on Blu-ray and DVD or whatever, and just show people what we mean, like this is what we created. That would be enough of it. It doesn't have to be popular or big. I just want to be able to show the actual art, because now, yeah, it's like you create a fantastic movie and people only have the soundtrack. It feels frustrating.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would have been surprised if Beloved Antichrist would have been one of the best-selling Therion releases, because, yeah, like, I can't emphasize it enough. It's a soundtrack to an unstaged rock musical. It's a very tough sell for the record company, and it's a very tough thing for the fans to get into, because it's like 3 hours of, and partly a lot of music which is made for a screenplay. So if you don't see what happens on stage, some of the music doesn't even make sense. So if people will say, "Oh, I loved it, I listened to the whole thing," then I think that's quite amazing, because it's a very difficult thing thing to get into. I mean, if you read the booklet and follow the story, I guess the music can paint some pictures and it will make it easier. But honestly, who has the patience for that today? People listen to fucking MP3s. They don't even have patience for albums. They make their own playlists. Just take the hit songs. I think the next step is going to be that bands stop making albums. They would just release a single every 2 months. But because the production cost versus the streams you get when you pitch a song is more effective if you just release singles. So maybe specifically in the metal scene, the album concept will survive a bit longer. But if I worked at a record company and with pop artists, I would say, look, give me a call whenever you have a new hit song and we'll make a single. So it's becoming a little bit zombified, everything, It's all about the hit songs, making your own playlist. I think some young guys that make playlists, they see what their friends listen to, they hear some song. They may not even know really what band they have in their playlist. Of course, they see the name, but they may not know what country they come from, how the other song sounds like. And I see how my son is, he's 12 years old. For him, it doesn't matter the band so much. He just like a song. If you like the song, he likes the song.
Yeah.
He doesn't know anything about the band or doesn't care, And they listen to music over YouTube. That's their thing. They don't even listen to Spotify. It's on YouTube.
Yeah. Listening to you, I get the feeling that in some sort of way you are frustrated, but with the fan base, that the new fan base that is coming in metal, not only for Therion, for a lot of bands. Guys who are on their 20s, they are starting to listen to different bands, but as you say, they just do a playlist on Spotify and they choose one song from each album. They don't have the dedication that maybe a fan in their 50s or 40s are doing, listening to the whole album, reading the booklet, trying to get the essence of what you are doing. Because, doing albums like Beloved Antichrist and this new Leviathan should be a lot of work.
Yeah, it was really a lot of work. And I'm also thinking, why make a nice record cover if it's going to be a thumbnail anyway? Streaming program. And I mean, when you have the album content, we even think about A-sides and B-sides of vinyl, because you're really old school, and you really think let's have an opening track. This is how the album should start, and then follow the record, with different keys, different tempos, and it should be entertaining until the end. And the last song should have a little bit. I don't know if this makes sense to most people, but if you know Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker, Guide to the Galaxy, maybe it makes sense to you. But we always say that the last song needs to have a little bit of a goodbye and thank you for the fish vibe, Like the dolphins go back up to space and, it's hard to describe what you mean, but it has to be a certain feeling in the last song on the record. So we really put a lot of energy into making that experience. And it feels a little bit sometimes you throw pearls before swine when nobody gives a shit. But, I mean, it is the way it is, You cannot change. If some people prefer to listen to music in a certain way, there's nothing you can do to stop it. So you just have, as long as it still makes sense financially, we will continue to make records and we will do it the best way we can. And if there will be a day when the record company says, screw this, just give us the hit songs, I guess we have to do that or stop making music. We can't change it. But on the other hand, there's some hopeful things because vinyl sales actually goes up every year. It goes up from a bad starting point, but it still, continue to improve. So you do have a subculture of people who really cares about the sound. And they buy the vinyl because it sounds better and they want this big, nice cover. So we really have more and more thoughts about vinyl, when it comes to dynamics and how to put the songs. So maybe it will be like an underground thing. Like when metal came from the beginning, it was kind of like like a subculture. People, if you were a metalhead, you would dress in a certain way. You would always have long hair, and if you would see some other metalhead on town, you would immediately start talking like, "Hey, you got a Legion T-shirt." So maybe because metal became very mainstream. It became just a regular music, at the time. Sure, people, work at the bank and look like anybody, and then they go on a metal concert and they put on a metal T-shirt and so on. But in general, you can't see who is a metalhead. You go in town and you see some 45-year-old woman with the kids and the dog and everything, and maybe she listens to Motorhead. You don't know. But maybe there will be like a subculture again, within the metal thing, that people who are really interested in the album concept and all that. And I guess that would be enough, to motivate to continue this type of album thinking, even if you just sell a few thousand vinyls.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so this Leviathan album is your 17th album, and you mentioned before that with the Level Antichrist, you already reached the point where you satisfied yourself with everything you wanted to do in music. Do you still feel this way 4 years later? 3 years later, sorry. Do you still feel like you have done everything? There's nothing, absolutely nothing that you want to try with Therion? Maybe in the future you would want to go back to things you have done already with Therion? I don't know.
Well, that's what we did with this record, maybe a hit album. Mm-hmm. I feel in general that the time of big innovation has passed in music in general. It's not just Therion. It's like I haven't heard one single band that has been original, a new band that was original the last 10 years. The only band that continued to be original is Boyhood, because nobody else said that before. But there's a lot of good music being made. There's a lot of new bands that are great bands, and older bands made a lot of great albums. There's a lot of great music being made, but there are no real big innovations anymore. It's more about writing good songs. So it feels like maybe that's a new thing. It's just about entertainment. Try to write good songs. Eventually time will always catch up with you anyway. If you look at Jimi Hendrix, you're a music journalist and I'm a musician, so we have a special interest around this. So you know that Jimi Hendrix was a fantastic innovator. When he came in 1967, he made a revolution back then, which would lead to hard rock and then eventually metal. And if you ask any of the first generation hard rock bands like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Uriah Heep, and even bands that came later like Judas Priest, they will all say like, "Wow, Jimi Hendrix, he just completely changed everything." Ask a metalhead today, young metalhead like Jimi Hendrix, what's your thought on that? They'll probably say, old dude that wrote some classics, and that's what happened with everybody eventually. I remember in the 90s, we would be hailed like this super original band causing revolution in metal, in a smaller scale, not like Jimi Hendrix, but, in our own little mini bubble, creating symphonic metal. But eventually time catches up with you, and you're just some dude who wrote some symphonic metal classics. So it's also very difficult to be original, because what we did 20 years ago, people will say, "Oh, it's so original, why? I've never heard anything like it." And if you do it today, it's just another song. So I really don't know what you would do to be original anyway. Of course you can stand on your head and record balalaikas, together with black metal growls and blast beats and throat singing from Tibet, but it wouldn't be good. Of course you can make something totally weird and say, "Hey, this is original, nobody did it." But if we speak about listenable music that people want to hear, I really don't see how you can make original music now. Eventually there will be a song or two that is original, but not like a whole concept, like a whole new sound. Like if you compare with the history of metal, you had first hard rock, and then you had the punk, and then the heavy metal, thrash metal, death metal, black metal, gothic and symphonic metal of the 90s, and then prog metal and folk metal, and then nothing came. And I don't think there will ever be another big revolution like when thrash metal came or something like that.
Yeah, totally. Reading the reviews that the album is already getting there online, most of them mention Therion is fun to listen to again when they talk about this Leviathan. What do you feel about this? Because I mean, for sure, for you, each album was fun to do, but they are mentioned Leviathan as a fun album to listen to. Do you consider this album this way, besides being a hit album?
Well, we're giving people what they want, so it's kind of expected. But like I said, Beloved Antichrist was a pretty tough sale because it's a soundtrack for an unreleased musical. And then before that, we did a cover album, which is not a regular album. And so the last time we actually did a normal regular album was 10 years ago, or 11 years ago, with Tijuana, which is not the most popular album we did. It's kind of, I don't know how to describe it. But yeah, you have songs like Land of Canaan, which I think is the best song we ever wrote. But it's a pretty tough song as well, like 50 different riffs, different styles with harmonica. A lot of the stuff on that record was very far away from metal. So if you're a really metal fan, I can understand that this maybe wasn't the favorite album of you. It's quite predictable also. When we made Tijuana, we didn't expect it to be the best-selling one because songs like Chiller Than the Stone, and it's not what you sell to metal audience, but it felt that's what we wanted to do. And the same thing with Beloved Antichrist. It's more like a project made by Therion rather than a Therion album. Mm-hmm. But I have to say that within the Fleur de Mal, if you see the comments on the internet, you would get the impression that this is a big flop and people hated it. But as a matter of fact, I think that's the most successful cover album ever from any band in relation to the band's regular success. Mm-hmm. The most streamed song on Spotify is Mon Amour, Mon Ami, right before Right of Sodom. It has almost 3 million streams. Mm-hmm. I think a cover of a French chanson from the 60s. And as a whole, that Woven is our best-selling album regularly, but Le Fleur de Mal has more streams than Woven. If you check in the Spotify, you will see that you have to count them together. But Le Fleur de Mal has over 12 million streams. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are cover albums that sold more from other bands, but if you compare other bands' cover album sales compared to the regular sales, if you compare the Fleur de Mal sales to the regular sales, you never had any established band that made a cover album late in their career, and the cover album sold more than the regular records. It's just unheard of. But it seems to be an album which it's not cool to like it. So on the internet you will see just shit about it, like people write it's just crap on this. And the weird thing is that we did the job so well that a lot of people don't even understand that it's a cover album. They think I wrote those songs. That's completely bizarre. So I don't know how to feel about that. It's selling better than my regular stuff. If you would have asked me when we did it, I would have said, no, this is an album, to cause some reactions, and it's part of an art project. And I thought, if we can sell some copies of this, it'll be okay. If somebody would have said, like, hey, 10 years later, or even less than 8 years later, this one will have more sales digitally than Woven, I would have laughed you in the face. I would have said, like, sorry, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But here we are. But anyway, this is what we've been doing the last 10 years, basically. So we haven't made a record that did really well for the core fans since 2007. So I understand that it's like very welcome that we made something which is easy to listen to for a change, no weird experimentation, and just cool songs that people want to hear.
Yeah. Sometimes it could be frustrating, actually, that you feel like the intentions of the band are misunderstood in general. As you say, you have a cover album that sells more than a regular album, and you have an album that is it's obvious that it's hit songs like this, and you have other great masterpieces that just people don't pay attention to. So it could be very frustrating for an artist that has been in this game for that many years, trying to do something different.
But you know what? I'm not so sensitive to, which record is more popular and which sell more. I mean, I always made good money. No matter which record, I earned good money. Mm-hmm. I could do what I love to do. We made headline tours. Sometimes there were more, sometimes there were less, but there were always people there. So we could make headline tours. We can play whatever songs we want. We could make whatever record we want. And I had, I was well paid to do it. So I never had to think like, fuck, I can't pay my rent, so I need to make a hit song, I never had to think about that. And I never had the record company saying, hey guys, you don't sell enough anymore, you need to change your style. So we had artistic freedom, and we could just do whatever we want. And, being paid to do that is like the dream job on the planet, with no pressure whatsoever to do this or that. So for me, it's very symbolic, like, oh, that record sold more than that one. Who cares? I mean, you can just do what you want. But I was never in it for the money. As long as I can live a good, comfortable life, I'm just totally happy with it.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't make a difference to me. I mean, of course, live, you need to give the audience what they want. So live is like a mixture of what they want to hear and what we want to play. So there's certain songs you have to play pretty much. But it's okay, because if you play a song like Rise of Sodom, it's mind-numbingly boring to play on guitar. It's basically like one chord half the song, it's really boring. But when you see how happy people get, it makes it one of the most fun songs to play. So in the rehearsal room before the tour, it would be like, fuck, we need to rehearse Rise of Sodom. Mm-hmm. But once you're on stage and you see how happy people get, it's one of the most fun songs to play. So
good.
I'm totally fine with it. I never saw any downside,
Yeah.
I only see upsides.
Good. Well, Christofer, just to finish the interview, one last question. Therion, in their career, they have done such great albums that a lot of people consider being milestones or are actually very influential. You now, after 17 albums, do you feel like your music, what you have created in the past and now, really got an impact of what new bands are doing now? Do you see that influence?
I think it's more indirectly, because when we started to do this, basically nobody did it. Of course, we were not mixed. We didn't invent the wheel. I mean, you had Celtic Frost doing it to Pandemonium in 87, and Celtic Frost was inspired by these 70s bands who would mix rock music with classical. So, I mean, we were another step on the ladder developing, but I think we were the first band on the planet to have opera vocalists as main vocals, at least in metal. So I guess that was our big contribution to it. And I guess what we did was that we popularized it. We took something that was very obscure and made it accessible to a bigger audience. But then you had, right after us, you have Nightwish, and you had Epica, After Forever, Within Temptation. There was a lot of bands coming. And I mean, I don't know if all of them were super Therion, but I know Nightwish at least were influenced by Therion, and Epica at least to a certain extent. And they became so big, especially Nightwish platinum selling, so they would continue to inspire the next generation. So I think it's more like an indirect thing, like if somebody's listening to Candlemass, for instance, and you're influenced by Candlemass, then you're indirectly influenced by Black Sabbath, even if you never heard Black Sabbath, because Candlemass wouldn't have sounded the way they did without Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of young bands today, when they start a symphonic metal band, I don't think Therion is their main influence. It's probably more Nightwish and Epica and Hidden Temptation, that type of band. Partly because they became bigger, but partly because they also made more accessible music. The good thing that I think about Therion is the diversity. There's so many different styles. But this was also the thing that held Therion's success back, because we were too weird to be a platinum-selling band. I mean, after the Woven album, I had a discussion with the manager at the time, and he said, if you make another album like this, you will sell gold. You know? And you need to be consistent, you know, and make sure that, you know, Martina will be like her, you know, make her face famous because you want to have a face of a band, you know, and all that. I did the opposite, you know. I got rid of Martina because she was behaving unprofessional. We made an album, Dejo, which didn't even have a video song in it, you know. We made a more complicated record. We did everything wrong from a commercial point of view. And I would have done it again because it felt like the right thing to do. And it still sold well, and I could do whatever I wanted. I still earned money, and I was successful. That was enough for me. But I think a lot of people, they don't think of it that way. They have these rock star dreams. You know, they want to be successful and big and famous, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know. And then I think you probably don't look to abstract bands for inspiration. You look to the bands that made it, you know, big commercially.
Yeah.